Okay, and here we're live. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this webinar. We're very excited to have 4 composers here from Indonesia and who are working in multiple places across North America and Indonesia. I'm Joseph Glazer. I'm from the Canadian Music Center, and we also have this is also a co-presentation with Array Music and the Evergreen Contemporary Gamelan Club. Before we start, I would just like to acknowledge that the land that I'm on is, and the CMC is based in Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we thank the Indigenous people who share this land with us and allow us to be here as uninvited guests. The Canadian Music Center in particular was founded in 1959 and in the context of violent state policies targeting Indigenous communities, including the Potlatch Ban and the 60s Scoop and residential schools. And these policies were not part of some dark chapter that has ended and is in the past, as injustice and violence against Indigenous people are ongoing. Missing and murdered Indigenous women, the disproportionate incarceration of Indigenous people, and the defunding of Indigenous-led education curriculum, and many more well-documented forms of systemic violence. Acknowledging the land is to acknowledge the ongoing history of genocidal policies that dispossess Indigenous peoples in order to facilitate the exploitation of land by and enrichment of settlers. Acknowledging the land is to acknowledge that the CMC and many legacy arts organizations within Canada have been part of racist policies that devalue and seek to erase Indigenous cultural expression. The CMC, as a call to action, has been engaging with its policies and guided by our Accountability for Change in Indigenous Advisory Councils, and it will include form of redress connected to our existing collection of works, and will also guide our thinking about language, services, and programming now and in the future. So as we begin to touch on some of these perhaps similar, perhaps quite different discussions about music over the coming 2 seminars, I'd like to invite our curator. We're very happy to be joined by Jody Diamond, and she will introduce herself and the participants.
Welcome to everyone. I'm very excited that I'm able to be here. This is my world, gamelan, and what people do with it creatively all over the globe. I started playing gamelan at CalArts in 1970, took my first trip to Indonesia in 1971, and just decided I was going to play gamelan the rest of my life from then on. In the 80s, I became aware that there were gamelan groups in 25 countries outside of Indonesia. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we all kind of knew each other, could share information? So I started, I'd already started the American Gamelan Institute, which is at gamelan.org, but I started a journal, a magazine journal called Balungan, so we could share information about what everybody was doing. And I would collect concert programs from groups in England and Australia and stuff. And this is what the programs would say. Any piece that came from Indonesia was credited as traditional. And any piece that was created by a member of the group would have that person's name. So Ladrang Pangkur, traditional, Mass for flute and gongs, Neil Sorrell. So that was very interesting. When I was in Indonesia in 1984, and I met a choreographer named Sardono Kusumo. He had been asked by the Indonesian government to lead the 6-month mission of Indonesian artists to the Indonesian pavilion at Expo 86. He was also aware that people who studied gamelan and dance and other Indonesian arts outside of Indonesia were studying with teachers who had to treat them like they were just starting. And that those teachers weren't always coming to those jobs as creative artists. So he wanted to do something about that. So he said he would lead the Expo mission only if he could have, during the 6 months, an international gamelan festival. And they agreed to that. So they thought about all the groups all over the world who were doing new music for gamelan, but who didn't seem to know about new music and composers in Indonesia. And so he hid inside that Misi Kesenian, the group to play tourist shows, some of the most significant experimental composers of the time. Wayan Sadra, Subono, Asnawa, a list of very special people. So when the International Gamelan Festival happened, and people came with their compositions and their groups, when the Indonesian composers presented their experimental works, everybody was like this. Oh my God, how could we not know about this? Why don't our teachers teach us about experimental music in Indonesia? And I had one night a talk with Wayan Sadra, and he said, it's so hard to do new music in Indonesia. You have to have so many rehearsals, and maybe you get one performance. And if you remember to record it, you might get a good recording. And I said, well, you're talking about new music in New York. It's exactly the same. We're the same. We're counterparts. And I vowed that I would not compose another piece for gamelan until I'd done something to help the world know about experimental composers in Indonesia. And 2 years later, I interviewed 40 composers. The reason I tell that story is because of Sardono's idea of rebalancing the world's vision of the existence of rich, traditional, established arts, but incredibly deep, creative, experimental arts in Indonesia. And because of that festival, I don't think anyone ever thought again that there were not composers in Indonesia. And this evening is another proof that that's our reality and that that's what we want to share. So I'm very, very happy to be here. Who goes first? Did we decide? I don't know. Putu, would you like to go first?
I think there was a schedule up on the website that was out, but it doesn't mean we have to follow that. So I can go first if we.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'd like is each person, before you start, tell us who you are, where you're located now, and what your background is, what your connection is to Indonesian arts and to the global art that grows out of us knowing and sharing and making music with each other. Go ahead, Putu.
Great, wonderful. Thank you all so much. Terima kasih atas undangannya. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this. My name is Putu Hiranmayana. I'm a assistant professor of performance and creativity at Grinnell College, which is a relatively new position for myself and for the department. But I come from a Balinese gamelan background, which isn't entirely true. I also do come from a Japanese gamelan background. I just don't typically play. That is more my parents' forte. But I've been in the United States for a little over 30 years now, and have the privilege to go back and forth from Bali to the United States to bring university students from the US and from other parts of the world to come and study in Bali in the summers and sometimes in the winters with my family. So definitely getting to experience the bridge that is both worlds. But again, thank you for inviting me and for sharing this time.
No. So now you're going to talk to us about your music. Go ahead. I'll just do it at the beginning. We don't have to do a round robin and then stop and come back.
Sorry. Yeah, I thought everyone.
The floor is yours. No.
Got it. I thought everyone was doing their introductions. Wonderful.
Well,
okay. So
would you like to do that? No, go ahead. I think it's nice. Just you say who you are and show us your music.
Okay.
And we'll be listening.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll just introduce a little bit of what I do in my research, and how that pertains to my compositions and also the communities that I work with in the US and in Bali. They stem from my research interests in indigeneity, discursive conceptions of noise, so different ways of thinking about noise, or for Indonesian terms, keramaian, right? The idea of rame, the idea of boisterousness and noisiness, that envelops a lot of our social spaces, but also a lot of the kind of music that I'm interested in making as well. So before I continue speaking a little bit about those interests and this idea of, especially our panel, right? It's called Roots and Offshoots. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful title for I think who we are. Joseph, if you could play the first video, and actually the only video, and then I'll sort of talk about that as a jumping point.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to redo this 1 sec. Won't be long.
Okay, hopefully I didn't blow out your speakers there. So that was a piece that I arranged for Gamelan Balaganjur. So for those of you that don't know, or those of you that need a reminder, Balaganjur is a Balinese processional music that is traditionally used for cremation ceremonies, but a lot of different kinds of life cycle ceremonies in general in Bali. But the one of the main things I like about it is that it's a portable kind of gamelan, and it's intended to be processed with and moved around with, even though in the video you see us sitting down. So the arrangement of this tune, it wasn't a composition of mine. This is an arrangement of actually a heavy metal tune by a band called the Dillinger Escape Plan, adapted for Gamelan Balaganjur and played by the Gamelan Tunas Mekar from Denver, Colorado, who my family has been in residency for since we've been in the United States, so roughly 30 years ago. And I wanted to show this piece for a few reasons. The first reason is that just from a sonic standpoint, just from sound and a musical practice, it was a really fun piece to do, to be able to sort of reorient this metal instrumentation, so drums, guitars, distortion, those kinds of things, that idea of rame or noise within the metal setting, and sort of adapt it for the ideas of rame in Balaganjur, which is really important for that kind of music, especially in its traditional form and its sacred form, but also as a contemporary and experimental idiom and medium as well. But it also illuminated a lot of things during this project about the state of gamelan music. And I'm contextualizing right now just to Balinese gamelan in the United States. And my sort of experience with the transferal of cultural sharing. And so a lot of my research has to do with centering various different kinds of communities and various different ideas and what is necessary for that moment. And I think at this moment in time, and I'll share these accounts based on anecdotes of field research, but also just in general of socializing with these kinds of musics. And that is, we're still living in a moment where we as Indonesian practitioners and as Balinese and Japanese practitioners outside of Indonesia are still in a point of catering to the larger masses of communities outside of Indonesia that are interested in gamelan. And I'm not advocating that this is a positive or negative thing, but there is still this sense that we're sort of giving up. We as Indonesian people are still giving up a lot of our identity for the betterment of, or for the catering of other sort of communities. And so on a positive side to that, you know, people like me who have lived outside of Indonesia for most of our lives, we wouldn't have anyone to play with if we didn't sort of have to cater to this community that are playing music that aren't Indonesian peoples, right? At the same time, I can sense and I can see a lot of Indonesian practitioners having to give up a little bit of their compositional identities, their own identities, as a way to mitigate these musical and social communities. So I'm not here to propose a call to action or anything like that. I'm just here to raise a few questions and in hopes that these kinds of musical communities fed through compositions of Indonesian peoples will see more value in it rather than just this sort of points of catering, and really valuing that we are becoming, especially as more Indonesian artists reach out to different countries, really valuing that we're not just sort of these exoticized beings, and can really create these kinds of communities that are valuable for people outside of Indonesia too. And so this piece was really fun for us and really illuminating because there were two musics that are kind of on the peripheries. So heavy metal tends to be categorized as a music of exiles, right? Or people don't really like listening to it because of its harshness. We totally understand it, but they mean different things for different communities. And for it to be in the medium of Balaganjur, really kind of what I was attempting to do is sort of reclaim that space of catering and really just play the loudest thing I could think of with a group that was susceptible and able to play this kind of music, but also sort of forcing the hand a little bit in the compositional and musical practice. Anyway, that's all I will say for my sort of overview. But I as a way to end sort of my presentation, I am really truly indebted to my family, who worked really hard to be here and had to go through a lot of these moments of catering, and also the Indonesian artists and families that have left Indonesia to be in a faraway land, and also sacrificed a lot to maintain this sort of art form that, quite frankly, a lot of Indonesians don't partake in anymore. But hopefully that's changing too. And of course, indebted to the communities around the United States and where we live, and of course Canada, and in maintaining the vibrancy of and creating those spaces where we can truly thrive in these settings. Okay, terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you, Putu. that was a lot to think about there. And I wanted to mention to the participants who are listening that after we have the 4 presentations, we will have time for discussion and questions. As questions come up while you're listening, and I've already got like 4 questions written down, put them in the chat, and then Joseph will collect them, and we'll be able to ask each of the composers about the things you want to know more about when we're finished. Well, we've been in North America. How about we go to Indonesia now? And Iwan, are you ready to do your presentation?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, please.
Okay. Okay. Shall I to introduce myself?
Tell us who you are and where you are. Yeah. Yes, okay. Please do.
Okay, thank you for the time and thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Yeah. So my name is Iwan Gunawan. I was born in Bandung, West Java, Indonesia, 1974. So now I am a composer, a leader of my ensemble, Gamelan ensemble Kiai Fatahila, and also I am now is educator in University of Education in Indonesia. So my background is, of course, the Sundanese Gamelan, and I was playing Gamelan. Yeah, my parents said it's since 6 years old. Yeah, but I am still remember how my parents teach me to play gamelan, because in my home there was the gamelan already in there, and I just play like the child, and I'm not realized. And then when I study in senior high school, or we call SMK, Sekolah Menengah Karawitan Indonesia in Bandung, I met the great teacher. Yeah, one of them is Nano Suratno. I think he was invited also by Evergreen Club Gamelan. So I a lot of studying from him about how to compose. This is the firstly, but it was, yeah, it's just natural because I am still a boy. I didn't realize about how to create to more creative to do. I just using what I like. I just sometimes just combine the other ideas, and yeah, just create it. But when I study in the university, I met Dieter Mack. He is the one of the guest teacher, yeah, guest lecture, I think, guest lecture from German, and I study a lot of things. So, and then I uh, first I interesting about the something different culture, because in SMK I just play and studying about the Karawitan or Sundanese music. But in my university now I have to study Western music. It is funny for first time, but and then yeah, I also interest to study piano. Yeah, the instrument piano. Uh, not just not for it is just interesting about the contemporary music in Western. So for that I learn, and then there are something grow up for me to see how the Sundanese gamelan can develop. So actually I will not to talk much. I uh, uh, would like to more share about my work, especially about my gamelan work. So let me to share screen to all of you. Okay. Okay. So until now, I'm very interesting to concern about the laras, the tuning system in gamelan. So when I when I also a bit studying about the Balinese gamelan also, of course, and also I'm listening the Javanese gamelan. There are something interesting in what's happened in my culture. The interesting is like the how the Sundanese music. There are a lot of the phenomenon of the using multilaras or multimodality. So first, I would like to give some picture. So the maestro of Kusuma Dinata was uh, give some formulation about the laras in Sundanese music, especially for the gamelan. So in gamelan Sunda, sometimes they use multi-modality or multi-laras. So this is the theory of that is, but let me see the some example. Yeah, for example, there is some song called Sri Bedari. In this song, like some melody of vocal is use madenda tuning or laras madenda, but the gambang use slendro. This is the traditional music. So let hear.
Kacaturkeun hiji dongeng dina jaman pawayangan yutat baban loka nu ayeuna rek didangding dikawihkeun ku hariring jadi
So this is the basic concept. What Kusamudinata make some theory, but the interesting thing now the Sundanese musician or Sundanese people they create the new gamelan based of the Kusumadinata theory. So they create the real multiraras with the each instrument in gamelan. Yeah, in the first example, this is just normal. Like the gamelan just use lendro and the vocal or rebab melody can use any laras. But now the interesting to more I mean the gamelan, not just Lenro, but using the other laras. So this is the second example about the implementation of the Kusumadinata theory. So yeah, the both of this example is the my basic to concern about the laras when I create the new piece. So the firstly I would like to share you the my first piece when performed in the international stage. It is called Kulu Kulu 2010. Actually, this piece, the first version, is created in 2005 only for Slenro. But in 2010, there are the event, the Gamelan Festival in Amsterdam, and they asked to collaborate with the ensemble Gending from Holland. So for that, I make arrangement to use the both laras for the Japanese gamelan, fellow, and slendro. Okay. Okay. In this event, beside we have to perform the traditional piece, and I also perform the old piece, but they give my the commission to arrange to make arrangement of the six marimbas by Steve Fry. So this is the start. I'm concerned about the laras to think more deep about the laras. So the question and how to adapt the six marimbas by Steve Fry with Western tuning into the gamelan. So this is the thing. So so first I just share some minute of this arrangement. So. Okay, I cut. I'm worried this is too long. So, but with this experience, so I have some new approach how to approach the tonal system or Western tuning in the Pelog-Slendro. So the last project, I think last year, yeah, last year I have also the project to create the song from the Western tuning, how to adapt in gamelan. So the project is called Grand Gamelan. So let's maybe we can visit this address. So I think I hope that could be work how to open link. Okay, this is online. So we have, I think, 9 song. I just to share a bit, maybe yeah, random, maybe last song. This is the what I said, like when the after experience to make arrangement for 6 marimba. So again, I have how to approach the tuning, Western tuning to Pelog-Slendro, and this is the another result. So first I have to play. Okay, yeah, I think enough. You can visit maybe to interesting to listening the all song for this kind gending. Okay, I have to continue.
Iwan, thank you so much. That's absolutely fantastic. And I hope that we can put in the notes on the YouTube stream contact information for all these composers, their web pages, some if you have SoundCloud or Bandcamp, because this is such a short introduction to 4 very interesting people. And I know I'd love to get some pointers to know how to find out more about you. Thank you very much.
So my
Okay,
time is
Putu, are you available? Yeah. Go ahead, Mas Iwan, what?
Oh, I still have time?
No, I think we're going to stop now and we'll come back
Yeah,
in the discussion. Is that okay?
yeah. It's
Can you
okay. It's okay.
save those wonderful ideas? Okay.
Yeah.
We're trying to get a little taste of each person and then we can share more ideas
Okay.
after we've met
Thank
each
you.
other. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Arya, are you there? There he is.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, let's share my screen. Full screen. Can you see it?
There's quite a bit of there's some distortion on
From my sound?
in the sound, like a wind kind of, yeah. Good. Okay. Now just unmute your mic.
Sorry.
You hear it?
Is it better now?
Well, it's kind of like a canvas in the background. Maybe when you start playing some music, it'll go away. Let's try that.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's still there. It's okay.
Okay. So, good evening everyone. Selamat pagi teman-teman di Bali. Bonsoir, pour mes amis à Montréal. So, okay, I would like to introduce myself. I'm a Balinese gamelan musician who has been learning to compose for gamelan since a young age. I first became interested in combining gamelan and electronics when I was a recording engineer for in situ recordings. Is a way of interacting with gamelan's sound become my main concern and led me to come to Montreal to learn more about electronic composition. So yeah, as a topic I'm going to talk now. So I'm going to talk and discuss my personal approach to combining Balinese gamelan and electronics by presenting my research degree research creation, gamelan electronic, a compositional approach to Balinese gamelan and electronics under the direction of composer Pierre Michaud and musicologist Jonathan Goldman. Gamelan electronic is a term I use to denote my practice, which consists of adapting electronics compositional techniques to Balinese gamelan practice. In Bali, traditional gamelan repertoire is usually learned by oral tradition as a group. Also, the compositional process happens during the rehearsal while the full group is present and ready to play what the composer suggests. I propose to apply this traditional practice to contemporary compositions. So, by learning and experimenting with already proven electronic compositional technique, I seek to adapt them to Balinese gamelan compositions. This is an especially relevant question considering there is a growing interest for music technology amongst composers in Bali while resources are still not widely available. For technologically inclined composers who live outside of Bali, the approach suggested proposes a gamelan practice-based way to create. So, in order to find methods to bring together gamelan and electronics, I was gather knowledge and practical experience with different compositional techniques. I then chose one or more approach to which I use in compositions. I explored the potential of the 2A Balinese gamelan frameworks through compositions. If performers are involved, the same pieces is taught both to a Montreal-based group and a group based in Bali. Through the process, I take note what works well and less well. I start again taking into consideration those results. These are the compositions that I have composed. It is ongoing process where I try new techniques on each of my compositions. It is really satisfying for me to try out new techniques for making a compositions. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk my last compositions, Yatra Nunggal. So this is the part of the composition. So the whole piece is 20 minutes. So what are the techniques that I use? So first technique is live electronics. So I use 7 microphones to record the sound of the instruments into buffer directly. Then I treated them to create an electronic sounds. And in this composition, I don't often control the electronics manually. Most of them are run by themselves. And the second technique is like audio reaction. So microphones are placed to capture the sound of the instruments depending on rules previously implemented in the code. Some other parameters react. So for example, its light react to the loudness of their nearest instrument by getting brighter with a loud sound and dimmer with a soft sound. So another example is delay effects will start when, for example, a klontong instrument is being played. So these are the example on my code here in Max MSP. So it's run by themselves. So you can see here detecting directly. So tong again. So great. Then second technique is algorithmics. So I programmed an algorithmic suling follower where it could follow the idiomatic behavior of Balinese sulings. So this idea came from my friends Zach Gary Henny and Zach Gary Hazen. So thanks to them. To make this a program or meet some condition when it can tell the algorithm what to do. So the Suling follower will analyze live the pitch of the main melody, the bantang gending, which is played by the jublag. Then it will make a variation on its own. But in this piece, it will follow the pitch of jublag, as I said, when traditional it will play the pokok melody. So this is the example. Sorry. So next techniques is synthesis. So after making an algorithmic condition where it can produce a geometric behavior of Suling, then doing live pitch analysis. Then I analyze the spectral contents of the Suling using sonic visualizers. So from that analysis, I resynthesize to make a close sound like Sulings. So this point is not to make the exact sound like Suling, but to integrate an algorithmic composition with Balinese Gamelan ideas. So next, specialization. In this composition, I use 4 speakers instead of instead of 2 speakers, stereo speakers. So the function of the speakers is as an instrument that is placed around the musician. Using 4 speakers will also make the loud sound produced by the big ensemble feel like blend in the space with the electronics effects. Moreover, I use the speaker to bring movement to the sounds, whereas the sound of gamelan is not moved. So this like 4 speaker, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this like sound sources being played. And then community practice. So my intent here is like working with community and musician. So it is like my main part of my practice on building my pieces. So teaching and discuss with the musician in gamelan Giri Kedaton help and influence to build this composition. So by like this making discussion and like receiving an idea from this musician is also like help me to build my composition. And notations. So I also use a notation to teach my compositions. I am honestly very happy because my friends at Gamelan Giri Kedaton are passionate about learning to understand the Balinese notation that I make. We often discuss how I write a notation as well. In this piece, we use a notation because the situation is in this situation in Montreal. We did not have enough time to memorize my piece. So in my opinions, this notation is very suitable for my ideas, where still in my Balinese gamelan idea still using ketukan instead of beats. So so I trying to like integrate that idea using a Balinese notation. I also this is a new approach that I started in these compositions, where I want to keep the gamelan relationship with the dalang and dance. So collaboration with dalang is done in distance, so we watch the footage of the wayang on the projector, but I plan to perform this this composition live in the future, hopefully. And I created also a gesture sensor using an accelerometer and gyroscope sensor to combine dance movement directly with the electronics. So that's how it works, the sensors that I made. Then this is how the sensor in the piece. Thank you. Okay, through this process, I found that the community is the core aspect of Balinese gamelan practice, which I find necessary to keep when composing. In order to play gamelan, it is imperative that all musicians be highly attentive and responsive to each other. While gamelan idioms, instruments, and sound are part of my compositional process, I suggest that these cannot solely constitute to the extent of this approach. Community in gamelan electronic can be developed through two different ways. By rehearsing and performing directly with artists, which can be achieved by adapting live electronics to a gamelan perspective. Community can also be developed by sharing thought on creation through collaboration or discussion with other artists. And in my opinions, live electronics is an electronics music approach that is the most suitable for Balinese gamelan practice. It makes possible to collaborate with performing artists who are used to play Balinese gamelan. Receiving many feedback from the musician will also lead me to find new ideas for my compositions. The specific result from live electronic sound will always change every time depending the algorithms, the musician, and the place where to perform. This kind of phenomena where I can find in Balinese gamelan performance as well. Ultimately, in this research creation, I'm going to focus and moving forward to explore and try new techniques and aesthetic in my next compositions. I hope this project will be useful for Balinese gamelan seeking to find their paths to contemporary composition, as well as for composers based outside of Bali who wish to explore a way to create as a community sensitive practice. And boom. Thank you to OICRM and Faculté de Musique, Université de Montréal for the funding, and merci beaucoup à Gamelan Giri Kedaton for supporting this project. Thank you.
Arya, thank you so much. That's fascinating, all the different things that you are doing. I want to move on to the person, our thoughtful, intelligent person that we've saved for our last person. I always enjoy everything that Sutrisno is thinking about. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to talk to us about.
Thank you very
So, Mas
much.
Sutrisno, silakan.
Terima kasih, Mbak Jody. Selamat sore, selamat pagi, selamat petang di Amerika and Toronto, and also early evening in Vancouver. First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the Canadian Music Center and Arya Music, as well as the Evergreen Club Contemporary Gamelan, especially to my friend, Mr. Andrew Timmer. I call him Kang Andrew, as I consider him as my big brother here in Canada. It's my second home. He's one of the well-known Canadian composers and also founder of Evergreen Club Contemporary Gamelan, where I met first time in Vancouver over 2 decades ago. It's a long time, but it didn't realize it that now I have been here for over 20 years. My name is Sutrisno. Javanese name is sometimes it's hard to pronounce it according to a Western tongue. So I have sometimes used my mnemonic name. If you say stressed, no, stressed, no, stressed, no, and stop at no, then that's my name. It's easy to remember. So you don't need to stress. That is my nickname. So because I'm dealing with the arts, including the gamelan, is my major interest. So when I'm considering the arts, which related to what we are sharing here in the universe, like anecdotally, when we are considering like the earth that we are sharing, spell it as EARTH. If without arts, it just sounds like right? So this is my introductions. And when I came to Vancouver in Canada in early 1990s, I was very amateur actually, related to my professionality on the gamelan performance. And it's hard for myself to be considered as an ethnomusicologist or even art educator. However, has been very fortunate enough to be given a chance to perform and collaborate and taught in many foreign countries. And I met some wonderful friends and composers, including Mbak Jody, Andrew Timmer, John Cyril, and other composers as well in Canada. And I did many collaborations and performed and created some new compositions. And today, I would like to share my experience and knowledge related to gamelan, which is my main focus on how to compose using gamelan, in this regard, Javanese gamelan. But first of all, I would like to share the screen first. So if you could please to put me on the host, that would be great. Thank you very much.
I already made you the host, Sutrisno.
Okay, great. So I would like to share the screen. Just make sure that you can see my PowerPoints as well as the composition that I made, and we can listen together. Share screen. I will search. Just share sounds. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, do you see my PowerPoint there?
Yes, we see your beautiful rice fields. There's your PowerPoint.
Thank you very much.
We now see your PowerPoint. You could make it a little bigger if you like. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, you see my PowerPoint. Okay, well, just
Yes,
to
we
save the
do.
time, I would like to introduce to Japanese gamelan compositions, which especially refers to how I compose. So my main focus here is related to my experience. So introduction to Japanese gamelan compositions. And as everyone knows, related to the background of gamelan, which is related to culture and spirits. So the gamelans, as everyone know, comes from words gamels or sutraex or harmer and plus an, which very general informations traditionally only played at a certain ritual ceremonies, special community celebrations, shadow puppet shows, or for the royal family. The most important things for the gamelan's performance when we use so many different songs or gending forms, which we will talk later. The gotong royong or sharings or mutual collaborations as a cultural principle is very important in this regard. Sometimes, as everyone knows, maybe from the articles and also from the books, it's also important to be considered how the importance of gamelan is to show the respect to God. That some symbolism also included on that visual image and also for the composition itself. Yeah, notation system is very common in Japanese gamelans using the slendro, 5 pitches per octaves. It sounds like da 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 da, or 1 2 3 5 6, and the pelog 7 pitches per octaves is slightly different. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and the missing 4 on the slendro is used for the sake of uniformity, not represents a gap or notes. For novice gamelan learners, I would highly recommend to check out for the informations or clear basic information related to the gamelans. You can check it out from https://sumarsam.web.wesleyan.edu /intro.gamelan.pdf. And also, of course, I highly recommend to check it out from gamelan.org, which Mbak Jody provide many beautiful and excellent information related to the gamelan. Okay, the melodic organizations, it's very important to be considered in this regard, because when I compose or try to make compositions, sometimes I have to consider related to what it is function of the instrument itself traditionally. When I'm talking about traditional here, using Indonesian language or bahasa tradisional, in relation to gamelans, I always imply that it is a musical form of gamelan that is seen as carrying cultural heritage, either locally or internationally, and it's studied from the masters, but that is ever static, always adapting and changing, traditionally evolving, one might say, within given parameters and sometimes also beyond it. That is very important to consider melodic organizations. Thus, we can see on this diagram here, I consider the timing and then the melodic patterns and also structure. If we compose the Javanese gamelan, it's considered this kind of thing that I'm thinking is very important to be considered. Sometimes my compositions using the patterns refers to gending form, for example. There are many types of gending forms in Javanese gamelans. For example, lancaran. Lancaran is 8 beats cycles. Let's go down here. Lancaran is 8 beat cycle that sometimes using different types of instruments, either slendem or demung or saron or peking, or combinations of those instruments that make a melodic patterns. That is in lancaran. Sometimes also using the ketawang forms. Ketawang is similar to lancarans, but the metrical system used on the melodic pattern is different. So structure using the ketawang is different than lancarans that usually only use 8 beats cycles, and 8 lines has 2 gadras. Gadras is the shortest elements of musical patterns in the Javanese gamelan forms. So the ketawang form consists of only 4 gadras in one gong, something like that, and only one kempul, which is refers to traditional context here in Solo and Jogja has slightly different styles. So this kind of considerations when I compose using the traditional system, I have to think that kind of guidance. That's helped me a lot. So when I change the melodic patterns and I put that kind of lyric, for example, it's very common that my compositions sometimes focus on one or more themes based on personal experiences.
Yeah. Mas Trisno?
Yes.
Yeah. Boleh saya mohon maaf?
Yeah,
This
silakan.
is so interesting, but we would love to hear your composition.
Okay,
if there's a composition coming at the end of all these beautiful ideas, could we hear that first? And then we could ask you questions about how you composed it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. I will share with you about the composition that I made here. It's available on here. How to compose using gamelans. It's available on songlines.com. I will share with you using similar traditional gending forms, but I add a little bit or change slightly according to my my preference. Here we go.
That's good.
songs, I will speed it up a little bit. So this is in 7. I will skip this song. You can listen later on, but to the middle here. That was one of my compositions related to how to.
Bagus. Bagus sekali, Pak. Go ahead.
Yes, one of the example that Can you hear me, Mbak Jody?
Yes, I think you've shown us that to compose for gamelan, there's so many things that one could know. It would take a lifetime to learn everything, and it's amazing how much you put into that piece. We'd love to have time to let people ask a couple of questions. Would that be okay?
Yes,
And maybe
of
we could
course.
put in the YouTube chat a URL for like where you have these pieces stored and the other composers' pieces, so people can go listen to the whole things with
Sure. Yeah,
the full
people can
attention that
see
all
this
this work
one
deserves.
here. I put on the
On song lines.
on song lines. I will copy here on the
Okay.
chat position that you can put also on
Okay.
the
We'll put it on the YouTube.
on the
If,
YouTube.
I've copied it
Okay, thank
to the
you.
YouTube chat.
Great. So this has just been an amazing journey through so many different perspectives on what gamelan means in people's lives and these artists' lives. And I think we do have a question from one of the YouTube listeners. Joseph, you want to give us that?
Yes, this is a question from Chris Hall. A question for Putu. What would you recommend to gamelan enthusiasts from outside Indonesia to help avoid the points of catering, as you described?
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Chris. And really great to hear the pieces by Pak Sutrisno and Pak Iwan and Arya. These are really inspiring works for sure. Like I said before, I'm not here to necessarily make a call to action or anything, or to provide any sort of things to do, because personally I also don't think that's the job of Indonesian artists to necessarily provide solutions. I think that's contextual to everyone that's participating, and those solutions will arise in different ways and manifest in different ways according to the communities that you all occupy. And I think some of the gripes that I have toward this are within the discourse. It is, I mean, even within this sort of overview of these kinds of symposiums and things that are ostensibly a little more academic too, there still seems to be a point of how can the greater global community be inspired by or have these points of making communities outside of Indonesia be more, I don't know, effervescent, or something that's contributing to theirs, rather than this sort of two-way street of how do we also contribute to Indonesians' artistic lives. And so even with symposiums and panels such as this one, there seems to still be this idea of like, oh, we're continuously sort of in a one-way street of taking and share and trying to be inspired by Indonesian arts, when it's very evident, even with these pieces by Pak Sutrisno and Pak Iwan and Arya, that we're now in a moment where we're trying also, the script is being flipped a little bit in that respect. So again, I don't have a good answer for what people should do, but I think just opening up the door here to discuss it, and for people to figure that out on themselves is an important thing to bring up.
Yeah. Maybe that's an answer we can find by doing more art together.
Totally.
I think. Yeah. So I was wondering, since we have this amazing group of artists here, would one of the composers who just presented like to ask a question of another composer? Because what an amazing conversation that would be. So does one of you have a question for someone else? Putu, do you have something you'd like to ask one of the other composers?
Sure. Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I'm just very floored by all of the pieces. But I think the one thing that's really illuminating by everyone's pieces and their approach to composition is that community is very important, right? the idea of playing together and socializing together. That's always going to be there. And I think this is part of the problem I'm sort of addressing with this catering thing too, is that sometimes, like, community is a very important thing in Indonesian culture, and of course there are very tricky politics that are involved too. But it seems that sometimes when I'm going to use this term as just a really giant umbrella term, but like when Western composers sort of are inspired by Indonesian artists, it tends to be a self-serving endeavor at certain times, not all the time, but it seems to be, how can I be better about individual art, right? And then so you don't have those conversations with communities. And so my question,
you said, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. This can be a question to anyone of my colleagues and friends, Pak Sutrisno or Pak Iwan or Arya, about your own experiences with presenting your compositions with communities that are not Indonesian. Do you find those ideas of gotong royong and things like that still exist? And are you able to get your compositions sort of fulfilled the way you envisioned and like to hear them with those
question.
Communities?
Yeah, what is that experience like? Who would like to answer? Although, you know, Iwan is the only composer who doesn't have to teach foreigners to play instruments in order to hear his compositions. So I'm wondering what the element of community is in that. It's a very different perspective, isn't it? The community that you have to create in order to have people to play your work, and the community that you create for who's already there.
Please allow me to share my
Arya,
my
did you want to answer? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Please.
Since I have been teaching in a foreign country, I consider my second home, Vancouver, Canada, here for quite a long time. Now I am considering myself have two different positions. While locally I can be considered as a Javanese, but internationally, people in Java call me as a foreigner or something like that. Interestingly, when I go back to my hometown in Java, I compose contemporary music. Javanese people might consider myself, Sutrisno, is not Javanese anymore. So that is okay for me to be considered as having two different perspectives in this regards, but I'm happy to consider here, and I learned a lot from many scholars and composers, and part of the collaborations that I made, and my quotations, popular quotations actually from you, Mbak Jody, like when people perform or collaborate internationally from Java, for example, like myself, you said that you might develop a biomusicality replicating Indonesian traditions. In this regard, I did that. But sometimes also, as you said, development of artistic skill, I developed myself two different skills in this regard, traditional and also contemporary. And then also the third point that you mentioned is to promote and encourage cross-cultural thinking. In this kind of positioning, cross-cultural thinking is open the world. That is almost no distance here. As I said earlier, we are dealing with the artistic works in this regard of music and performing arts. So the earth that we are sharing is exactly included many different things in this regard is the arts, and Gamelan is part of the art. So cross-cultural thinkings and engaging with others is very important, whether or not it is related to promotions of Indonesian traditions.
Right.
But gotong royong is needed. Thank you very much. It's my answer.
Yeah. Thank you. In a recent issue of Balungan, Wayan Sadra, a very interesting composer, wrote an essay, and the title was, "Does an Indonesian composer need to have a regional identity?" So he's a Balinese composer, but he's spent most of his artistic life in Java. So in Java, everyone says, oh, you're really just Balinese. And then when he goes to Bali, he says, people whisper behind his back, oh, Sadra's just so Javanese now, he's not Balinese anymore. So he says, why can't I just be a composer? And Putu is raising the other thing. It's not just regions. It's like, what do you do about creating an international identity? Do people see, it's like, you're an Indonesian composer, but you're also just a composer, or you're a composer in the context of this country that you live in. So the creation of our identity has a big effect maybe on the kind of art that we feel connected to, do you think? Andrew's nodding his head. Everyone's it's a challenging question. And I think in the next session, which we're going to have to stop in order to make room for, maybe that's one of the topics. How do we make a world that works for all of us?
Yeah, I think we will have to stop. There's a couple of other questions. I don't know if we want to maybe push till 8:45. That's cutting it a little close, but we could. How do people feel?
Well, you decide if the question is worth asking.
So this is sort of very much along the same lines. Johnny Smith has asked if Arya could talk a little bit about the ongoing learning process, working with artists and rehearsals, and what have you learned so far?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So what I have learned so far is how to talk with musician, how to talk with the artist. That's the most important things to me, what I have learned. So not the like a main point of like the idioms, like the idea of the art, like just the first thing, like how to talk with the artist, like how to like make the like be a part of their culture on the way they talk. For example, in English, the people like this, they talk. In French like this, even in Balinese, the way they talk, what I find it different. So the first thing that what I have learned is like how to talk with people, and after that, like how to understand what they mean, and then after that, just like talk like what should we do now, and yeah, like how to combine like many musical ideas or like any like artistic idea that will come through if I can communicate with them. I think that's the most important things. I hope that answered the questions.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, being able to communicate is also an element of gotong royong, which we talk, people working together to create something. So I think communication is a great word to start to end with.
Yeah, I think we will have to end there. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you all for being part of this. Terima kasih. And yeah, we'll see you all in about 15 minutes, hopefully, on the next panel. And again, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Joseph, and all the panelists. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Good night, everyone.